So before we get started, I want to be very clear and warn you, please don't blame me, but this video tutorial might interfere with your sleep and keep you up to 4 o'clock in the morning trying to do over and over and experimenting with what I'm about to share with you. I'm going to hide this Command 3, Control 3. Now, I'm going to go through some really cool techniques for creating amazing objects using the appearance menu. I'm going to do a complete series in this, but this should kind of get you up and running. And also, again, I apologize if it keeps you up to 4 o'clock in the morning. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit the ellipse tool. And I'm going to change the foreground color to, let's say, green. Okay. Now, for those of you who haven't seen my videos before, I always start out any project by hitting the A key to initialize the direct selection tool. Therefore, whatever tool I'm in, I can always go back to that tool on Macintosh by holding down the Command key, Windows by holding down the Control key. So I'm going to create an ellipse. Like that, hold down the Command key. Now you can't see the edges, the anchor points, because I hid them. Command H, Macintosh, Control H for Windows. So I like to work without seeing the anchor points depending on what I'm doing. Let me decide this for a second. Actually, I'll keep them up here. And what I'm going to do is directly select through these anchor points, hit Command K, and I'm going to change every time I use my keyboard shortcuts. I like to default to 1/4 inch, which is 18 pixels. So every time I hit the up arrow key, I'm going to create a shape like this. Now, I'm not talking about, I did this in a previous video. This is not what I'm talking about, okay? I'm going to share with you how to work smart with the appearance menu. Do some amazing, amazing things. Again, I apologize if this keeps you up to 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to go down here for a second. I'm going to create another ellipse. So let's click right there and let's create an ellipse that is 36 by 36. Now, of course, I can hold down the Option key as well. So if you hold down the Option key, that will do it from the center. Now, the other thing too, if you're creating things, it makes sense to have some kind of guide to guide and assist you. Therefore, we can get things right in the center of things. It's just a little personal technique I use. So if you want to basically have a guide, I would suggest doing that. Bring up your rulers, Command R, Control R for Windows. So again, I'm in the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to create an ellipse right here in the center. And let's just make that one black, so a good contrast. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is copy this down to about here, and I'm just going to make this kind of small. So I'm going to hit the Scale tool, S for Scale, hit the Return key, and let's scale this down at about 20%. Good. Okay. Now, here's my objective. First of all, in order to accomplish my objective in this particular video series, I need to select all. Anything about select is under the Select menu. Select all. Then I'm going to group the object. Anything about grouping, anything about the object is under the Object menu, Object Group, Command G. Of course, ungrouping is Command Shift G or Control Shift G on Macintosh, on Windows rather. Okay, make a change, save a change. Good habit to get into. Now, if your appearance panel is not up, I have my appearance panel docked in with my swatches. Of course, that can be found under Window Appearance. The shortcut by default is Shift F6. Okay, so here's what we need to do. Okay, I'm going to select all the objects, and in the appearance menu, you'll notice it says Group, because I grouped it by hitting Command G. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to scale this down a little bit. As for scale, hit the Return key, and let's scale this down starting at 80%. I could duplicate anytime I do things to the object I've transformed it. I can repeat the transformation by hitting Command D and Command D, and that's about where I want to be. Okay, at this point I want to hide the guides. Command semicolon Control semicolon on Windows. Okay, so I want to come right down here to the Effects palette, and I'm going to go to Effects, Transform, Distort, and Transform. Now this is really pretty cool stuff. So a couple things I need to do here. I want to basically pivot from this point down here. So I'm going to pick the bottom center point. I also want to click Preview, and let's say as an example that I wanted to rotate this around an oval, say 9 of these. So what I could do is 360 divided by 9. Now, this dialog box in the transformation of the appearance menu gives you the ability to make copies. Now let's understand something. If I have 9 of them, if I want 9 total, I'm not going to copy 9. I'm going to copy 8. It's always one less than what you asked for. So I did 360 divided by 9. That gave me 40% rotation. And I want to copy this 8 times. So I already have one of a total of 9. Last time I checked, 8 plus 1 is 9. Okay, so that gives you this. Now, here's the really cool part. What I could now do is double click inside of here to bring me inside the group. I'm going to go to the Move tool, letter V, and double click. That puts you inside the group. So I'm going to select all, except I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to deselect the center point. So now, based on how I have my properties set up, if I hit Command K again, recall that I had to set up to 18 pixels, which is a 1/4 inch. For those of you who don't know this, 72 points to an inch, pixels to an inch, half of that is 36. Half of that is 18, which is a 1/4 inch. So watch, I can now move this up. Notice that stays in the center. This is my center point. Pretty cool. Now, we're just touching the surface here because now I can do some very cool things. So as an example, if I go to my direct selection tool, I can do that by holding down the Command key on the left, hold down the Shift key, Command key on the right. So if I hit the down arrow key, I can now do stuff like this. So what you're doing, you're just manipulating those anchor points. Now again, we're just getting started. I'm just kind of teasing you with some cool stuff. Okay, so let's undo this a few times. All right, now at this point, I can basically add whatever other objects I want. So as an example, again, because I'm in the Move tool right now, if I hold down the Command key on Macintosh or Control key in Windows, I can now move that down closer to the center. So you know, all kinds of interesting things happening. Now, of course, I don't have to fill that with black. I can choose to fill this with red or any other color that I want. So again, we're just getting warmed up here. So the advantage of what I just did, keep in mind I'm still inside of group. So if I go back to layer and I wanted to now make further changes to this, I could simply go make sure that my group is selected in the group, and go back to transform. So the advantage of this technique, it's very, very flexible. So let's say that I didn't want to have 9. Maybe I wanted to have 7. So I could say 360 divided by 7. And then if I have 7, I want to have a total of 6. One more, 6 copies. And preview. Okay, so hit OK. So just endless possibilities with this. Now again, what you want to pay attention to, let's say as an example that I want to connect these objects, these kind of Star Trek looking objects with a circle. Well, here's a mistake that many people make that perhaps know the appearance menu, but I'm going to show you how to take it to the next step. So I'm just going to make sure this is selected. I'm going to hit the S for scale tool, hit the return key, and I'm just going to scale this down, starting at about 80%. Command D, Command D. Again, grab the page, grab the object, move the object, make a change, save a change. Okay, so what I like to do is I want to double click inside with my move tool, double click inside the group, and I want to create a circle from the center. So I'm going to go to the oval tool, click right there in the center, and start dragging by holding down the Option key. Now what's going to happen by default is probably not going to look too cool. So I'm just going to zoom in here for a second so I can get exactly that center point. So I'm going to click right here in the center, hold down the Option key, and drag this out to about halfway between the objects. Now, wackiness has happened because we need to fix something. I don't want to fill this, I want to stroke this. So I can hit Shift X. And I don't want to fill it with red, I want to fill it with black. So X to exchange, hit the X, so again, X is foreground. I'm sorry, X is, think in Photoshop for a second. X is fill, stroke, it exchanges. We're going to make this black. Now, in addition to that, I want to come up to my stroke and hit the up arrow key a few times. So I'm looking for a stroke about that width. Now again, if that's what you're looking for, these circles inside of a circle inside of a circle, but that's not my objective. So I'm going to share with you a really powerful technique. So I'm going to click right into here. And I basically did this in a previous video where I set up custom shortcut keys. And one of my custom shortcut keys under keyboard shortcuts I set up is something I use quite a bit, and that's why I made a shortcut out of it. Path, add anchor points. What I made, Command Shift Option A. So I'm going to do Command Shift Option A, Command Shift Option A, Command Shift Option A. Now here's what I want to pay attention to. Okay, I want to be at my direct selection tool. So hit the A key, and I'm going to select right here, click right there, actually not right there. It's going to lock this into place for a second, Command 2. I'm going to drag right here and select just these anchor points. Okay, so I just want to select these anchor points right there. Okay, so this anchor point to that path and this anchor point to that path. I have the green object locked into place to make the selection easier, Command 2. So now I'm going to cut this, Command X. Delete the rest of the circles, hit the delete key, and paste it back into place. So I can say edit, paste in front, and that puts that back here. Pretty cool. Now if I said edit, paste in back, edit, paste in back, I would get something like this happening, and that's the objective. That's what I'm looking for. So it's a really cool thing here. I'm going to unlock the green by doing Object, Unlock, Command Option 2. So if it's Command 2 to lock, it's Command Option 2, Windows Control Option 2. There you go. So you can get some really very cool things happening with your circles to connect through here. Now let me share with you another technique I can do. So if I have this selected, I'm going to unhide the edges so we can see what we're doing here. So let's add some more design techniques to this. So right now this is 7 points. So I'm going to basically downplay that a little bit more. I'll go down, 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 down. So every time I hit the down arrow key, will make it thinner. The up arrow key will make it thicker. So what you're doing here, rather than go 7, 8, 9, 10, anytime you're in a dialog box inside of Adobe Products, you can hit the up and down arrow key. So what I want to do here is go to stroke. I'm going to go to dash dotted line. Now I have this set up for 6 points, 6 points. Now what this is dash, gap, dash, gap. Now you get other versions of it if I was to do something like 12, 6. So you get some really cool things happening. Now if I come back up here to my stroke and hit the up arrow key, then I can do things like this. I mean, it's endless, endless possibilities. So I'm going to do another exercise in just a second. I'm going to pause the video and come right back. So here's a design I did earlier, and I'll explain how this works. So if I go to my move tool, double click, it's going to put me inside that group. So the way that this works, if I go to my direct selection tool and I was just to select just that anchor point, I have the anchor points hidden right now, by the way. Command H unhides, Command H shows. So if I was to do something like this, okay, now this is really pretty fascinating. So let's undo this for a second. What this is just a series of shapes. In fact, let me hit Command Y to share with you the original slate shape that this was. This is just 2 ovals on top of another. This is another oval where I move the anchor point on top of another oval. So that's basically all this is organically. Then through the appearance menu and the effects menu, you can kind of just go into outer space with this, no pun intended. So what I did here, if I click right there, I can move this up, I can move this down. But if I click this anchor point, then I can move that anchor point up, or I can move that anchor point down. But if you were to scale this as an example, so I'm going to directly select these 2 anchor points. See, what I want you to get excited about, we all understand how to rotate and how to scale, but what I want to get into your thinking is scaling, rotating specific anchor points of that object or add more anchor points to that object. So right now I'm going to go to the scale tool and hit the return key. But what I want to do is do a non-uniform scale. I want to scale this horizontally. For those that are new to this, as far as the scaling, everything starts at 100. 101 is bigger, 99 is smaller. So I'm going to start this at 110%, and I don't want to move this vertically. So I put in 100%. Don't put in 0. That's not going to work. And hit OK. So now what I can do, I'm going to hide the edges, Command H, and Command D, Command D, Command D, Command D. Get all kinds of very clever things happening. Now if I hit the up arrow key, I do things like this. Okay, or the down arrow key. So again, I want you to be creative with your tools. I'm hitting the down arrow key. So look at this. I mean, again, Command Y, that's all I have. That's all I started with right there, Command Y. So it's very, very fascinating by just having a complete understanding of those anchor points. But because I set this up in a group, so if I go to the Move tool again and you select this as the group, then you could transform this again. So it's endless possibilities that you can do with your transformation tool. So as an example, I'm going to hit Preview here, and this comes down to just experimenting. I want to give the idea and the tool set to do it, but then spend the next 5, 6, 10, 12 hours experimenting with this, staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning and doing this. So I'm going to come up here for a second. I'm going to hit the up arrow key. So the up arrow key is going to move this horizontally left and right. Okay, or I can hit the tab key and vertically. So I'm going to hold down the up arrow key and move this vertically. And if I hold down the shift key, it'll move up in 10-point increments. So endless possibilities here that you can do to work with your objects. Okay, now here's another thing. I'm going to take this and I'm going to make this back to 0 copies. So at the tab key, here's my copy. So let's say as an example that I'm not sure, I'm looking for a logo idea, I'm looking for a design idea, a repeat pattern for a shirt or a poster, etc., etc. So I'm going to come back here and I'm just going to say that I want to have a total of 5 of these, but I'm not sure what direction I want to go into with the rotation. So I can simply just experiment with rotation. I shared with you before in many other videos that you could do your math right inside the dialog box. 360 divided by x. But in this particular case, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. So I can say, I just want to rotate these 5 or 6. Okay, so now I have a repeated 5. See, repeating 5 gives you 6. Repeating 7 will give you 8. Repeating 12 will give you 13. It's always one less. So this is pretty cool stuff because I can now hit the up arrow key to just basically rotate this to my liking without any kind of symmetrical shape. And of course, if I hold down the shift key, I'll go up in 10-point increments. Okay, so the possibilities are endless, endless, endless. Again, if I was to go just things like scale, so let's scale this up at, here's my scale, and something I haven't talked about in this particular video, but if you go to random, then it's cuckoo crazy. All kinds of, look at this. All kinds of clever things that I could do when I do things randomly. So randomly is going to say, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it's really cool what can be accomplished. Now, if I want to get out of this dialog box, the shortcut to cancel any dialog box is Command period. So if you're printing, Command period. Windows, of course, that would be Control period. Let me show you another idea. So this started out, let me show you what the primitive objects look like in preview mode. So what this is just a technique that I shared with you a second ago of taking part of the oval and deleting the rest of it just by adding anchor points to an oval. This is an oval that I basically went to the Shift C key and pointed out the edges and then filled it in with gradient mesh. Okay, so this is gradient mesh, these are gradient mesh, these are gradient mesh. So the way I got this effect, so it looks like it's piercing the objects, is I basically have some in the front, some in the back. Okay, so I have objects on top of objects. This, of course, similar to the technique I shared with you a second ago, This area here is simply a stroked path with a dash gap effect. So if I was to double click into here, so again, you can do all kinds of clever things. So let's say I wanted the R for rotation, and I'm going to rotate this at, say, let's rotate this at 12 degrees and tab key. So if you don't want to hit OK, a little technique is you hit the tab key, it will show you the preview. Now, if I did this and make a copy, then of course I would have something like this at 12 degrees, which probably is not going to make a lot of sense. Okay, so again, once you're in here, it's basically Pandora's box as far as choices go. So if I decide to basically scale this up a little bit, so again, keep in mind I'm inside the group. So what you select is totally up to you. So if I was to select all and not select the bottom part, I don't want to select this bottom part here. So I can hold down the Shift key and deselect. So therefore, if I move this up, I'm going to make this bigger. It's going to keep the center intact, and it's going to, so I can do all kinds of clever stuff like this. So it's endless possibilities, but you have to understand anchor point manipulation. Okay, or not manipulating that area. So as an example, if I go to my direct selection tool again, and I was to pick through the mesh of this size right here, so I can go to my scale tool, hit the return key. So I'm going to scale this horizontally, 100% vertically. So 100% vertically means I'm not going to affect it vertically. I only want to affect it horizontally. So I get something like this happening. So if I hide the edges, Command H, I can hit Command D, Command D, Command D, and get a completely different feel and look. So I just go into outer space with this. And all I'm doing is hitting Command D. So experiment with different ideas, but understand that you have to group the object, then go into your appearance menu. So let's do one from scratch. I'm not going to save this document. I'm just going to bring up a brand new document. Okay, so let's do this again. So let's start with the ellipse tool, and I'm going to start with an ellipse right about there. Let's stroke this with none, fill this with green, go to Shift key C on Mac or Windows. I'm going to click right there and right there. I should decide to make this a little darker green. Anything about the object is under the object menu, object gradient mesh. And I'm doing it from the center point. And let's do 12 by 12. And if I preview that, I'll get something like this. Hide the edges so you can actually see without the anchor points, and there you go. Now down here, let's basically take a rectangle from the center. So I'm going to create a rectangle from the center, and I want to rotate that. Again, if you put a guide here, that would probably assist you better. So I'm going to make a rectangle from the center. And if I put a guide right there, it might be easier to put it into place. All right, so I'm now going to rotate this, R for rotation, at 45 degrees. So the rotation of 45 degrees, I now want to go to my, move this down a little bit. I now want to go to my direct selection tool. Let's see, 8 key. And I'm just going to come up here and make an arrow shape like that. Maybe something like this. Give it some contrast. I'll make that black. Okay. Now down here, this is going to be my pivot point. Now it doesn't have to start out that way as an example. So I could actually just make my oval right there. Okay, but the key is select all and group it. Anything about the object is under the object menu, object group. So now I'm ready for prime time. So if I go back to my move tool, the letter V, and I select this, I can now transform this. So distort, transformation, and transform. So if you want to rotate this, again, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to select preview. I'm going to rotate this from the bottom of the objects in the group. So I'm going to select from the bottom center. And if you want to have 7 of these, so you would say 360 divided by 7. Tab key down a few times. And whatever your number is 7, you need to make it 1 less, which is 6. So I get something like this happening. But that's not what I want to do. So I'm going to double click back into here, into the group. And what I want to have happen is I don't want to select that center. So again, it'll be easier to see this if I hit Command Y. So I'm going to do a select all, Command A, but I don't want to select this. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and deselect that. Okay. So now that this is not selected, this is selected, and because it's my center point, bottom center point of the object, if I go back to Command Y, I'm going to hide the edges, Command H, Control H for Windows, and now I can hit the up arrow key. And now I get some really cool things happening. So just remember that this is your center point. Now, for whatever reason, if you don't want to visually see this, then just select it, give it no stroke, no fill, whatever it is that you want to do. Now, again, I can, once I'm in here, the sky's the limit. I can basically do whatever I want with this object. I could change the color. I could change its, in fact, let's do this. Hold down the Command key, select the object itself. Actually, I don't have to hold down the Command key. Just select the object. I'm going to go to my reflection tool, letter O for reflection. Okay, so I'm going to hit the return key, and I want to reflect this horizontally, and I want to make a copy. So I get something like this happening. So now I can take that and move it down. Now, if I choose to, of course, change the color, I can do that. So I come over here and change the color to whatever color I want to change it to. So it's really fascinating, cool stuff. But here is the big advantage that perhaps you're not thinking about. If I Command Y again, everything is totally editable. Okay, especially if I go back to out of my group again, go back to layer, I have my complete group set up with the move tool. So I can go right back in the transformation and restart the whole process over. So I'm going to do more in-depth videos about this technique. But if you pay attention to this, and again, I apologize, this is probably going to keep you up to 2 o'clock in the morning. Let me show you one other one. So if you take a look at this for a second, Command Y, this shape actually, this entire shape started out from an oval, and all I did was add anchor points. Let me demonstrate that on this side here for a second. So if you have this selected, again, adding anchor points, my shortcut for that is Command-Shift Option A, so I can add a series of anchor points. Command-Shift Option A. Okay. Then from there, I can choose to do all kinds of clever things with the direct selection tool. So I can directly select this, go to my scale tool, scale up. So horizontally, I don't want to do anything vertically. Let's do 120% and start doing something like this. Then from here, I can select these anchor points. And again, the whole purpose here, guys, I want you to get, girls, guys, I want you to get creative with the tool. So if I click here, then I could do something like that, etc., etc. So then what I did is I basically just made a scaled copy of a copy inside of a copy. So that's it in a nutshell. So Command Y, this is what the object looks like. But from here, I can go to my Move tool, double click inside. So again, I'm inside the group. And if I go back to my object, Command Y preview, and select all except deselect the bottom one. So now I can expand up and out. Okay. In fact, if I do that and hold down the Option key, I can make a clone copy. Okay, right on the fly, literally in 2 seconds. Okay, so let's repeat that again. So if you move the object with the arrow keys, I'm going to move the object down with the arrow keys by holding down the Option key. So now I have a clone copy. I let go of the Option key, so I can just move this in. Okay, so now, and we talked about this in a previous video, I can do one of my other favorite techniques. In fact, I'm just going to change this to a slightly different color. I'm going to change that to maybe red. Okay, so once this object is selected, then hit edit colors, which I made the shortcut Command Option C. So in edit colors, I can go to edit colors, lock in my colors, and then shift the color in the key wheel. Okay, that's also, by the way, I talked about this in a subsequent video. That's also how I can color shift this. So if you wanted to color shift this, you can't just go and change the color. So I'm going to go back into Command Option C under Edit Colors, and what I would do here is I would go to edit again, lock the colors into place, and then I can shift everything at once. See, I can select everything that was a gradient in here. Pretty cool stuff. So again, my apologies, because this is probably going to keep you up to 4 o'clock in the morning. It's endless, endless possibilities. Thanks again for being here. My name is Robert Farrell. I humbly respect your comments, your likes, and everything else. Talk to you soon.